Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 13, Part 17-ish, something like that. Probably less, actually, probably 15 of my Rebel 6 Hard Mode Chapter Guide. Before we actually start looking at the chapter, I just wanted to mention a few things about the channel and about the series and stuff like that. We did just hit 300 subscribers on the channel, which, I know in the context of most big content creators is pretty minuscule, but it's just really cool. I just want to thank everybody for their support and, for enjoying the videos. I'm happy that I can, produce content that people are enjoying, and hope I can keep doing that. And then I just wanted to mention the uploads because I know it's been pretty few and far between, just with the holidays and everything. I was a little busier than I thought I'd be. So I'm coming out with this, and then hopefully we can get back on track with this, and then I can start streaming more regularly soon, and then I can upload those as well. But with that out of the way, let's talk about Chapter 13. So this is a chapter that I would say has more sort of story elements going on than actual gameplay stuff. There really isn't much to this chapter. You basically are just going to cross these two bridges. You can hypothetically go up here. Well, there's not much of a reason. There's just one bridge up there. And then beat the boss. Now, the boss is currently a green unit, which may surprise you. The boss of this chapter is going to change a few times. They do this a lot in this game. I mentioned on the previous chapter, the boss changed twice. This is actually going to be the final boss. And Zelgius and stuff are going to show up. Or no, sorry, not Zelgius, Zephiel. But yeah, as far as the actual game plan of this chapter goes, there's basically just a straight shot across these two bridges. These units are going to come attack you. There are these two ballistas that are a bit annoying. There are also going to be some wyverns we have to deal with. And these units, which are going to come from behind us. Now, basically, there's two different ways to approach this chapter. We can either go through very quickly and beat the boss, which is not impossible to do. Or, basically what's going to happen is this group of paladins, a group of paladins and cavaliers of basically the same type will come from up here, then down here, then up here. I believe there's four. I think one comes from down here. So that's a lot of stuff to deal with. And as you can see, the paladin has a silver lance. There's a killer lance guy. I believe there's also an axe reaver guy. So you do have to be careful with this. All of the groups of paladins and cavaliers that are going to be coming from behind you will have the exact same items these units do, and a Trebidor. So the way that you approach this chapter, I think, really comes down to how strong your team is. If you have a really strong team and you want to finish it very quickly, you certainly can. But just be careful because you don't want to be caught from behind and in front. You don't want to aggro too much. So I think for the purposes of this, I'll probably take the safest approach, which I think is dealing with the enemies from behind as we go across this bridge, although it is a bit tedious. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention before this chapter starts. We are going to be getting one new unit on this chapter, but it is not this fella over here. If you know anything about Fire Emblem 6, you probably know who Percival is. He's one of the best characters in the game. But this is actually a really good example of hard mode bonuses and why they work sometimes and they don't work other times. On the previous chapter, I mentioned that Ray, the shaman that we recruited, did not have hard mode bonuses because he started on the chapter. This Percival also does not. Now, those stats are still amazing, but just know that when you actually are going to be recruiting Percival, which is in a few chapters, he will get his hard mode bonuses, and he's going to be a lot stronger. So this is a really good sort of indication or way to show how hard mode bonuses work in this game. Basically, in this chapter, Percival starts on the chapter, but in the chapter where we recruit him, he technically starts on turn 1, or he shows up on turn 1. You can recruit Percival on this chapter, but it's really difficult and very unnecessary because, as I said, he's just weaker than when we're going to recruit him. I believe he leaves around like turn 5-ish. It's probably later, actually. But if you do somehow get to recruiting him, just don't. It's just a terrible idea. But just be aware this is how hard mode bonuses work. So I'm going to do some preps. As far as the units you should be bringing, the unit we're going to recruit can be recruited just by Roy. In fact, the character's name Melody will just go up to Roy and recruit herself. So you don't need anyone specific. Just bring your strongest units. And yeah, as I said, I'm going to do some prep, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more. Okay, so I just started the chapter. There's two more things that I want to talk about. Number one is that you can actually see two more people show up here, and this is Narshan and Zephiel, not Zelgius. Zephiel is potentially the final boss of the game, but is a very late stage boss, so it's kind of cool that you can actually see him here. He's going to be murdering Cecilia in a minute, who's the person on the throne. And then Narshan's a boss in a little bit. One of the things that I will mention is that Flare is the boss of this chapter, so bringing something like archers or potentially Air Caliber is really useful. I have Caliber on Lu, and then I also brought Klein because it's just a nice unit to have access to. But yeah, this boss is pretty easy to kill. The last thing that I want to mention before I actually get started here is Merlinus. So Merlinus, I mentioned earlier, is actually a really strong character because essentially you can just keep bringing him and he can keep dying. Bringing him just for that purpose, I don't think is the most useful thing in the world. Oh, and I actually just noticed. Yeah, I'm kind of cutting stuff off. All right, give me 1 second. All right, I had to readjust the way that this looks. All right, hopefully that isn't too jarring. Sorry about that. But Merlinus can be a really nice unit to deploy for those reasons. But the reason we're deploying Merlinus here is because there are some decent shopping opportunities over here. This is actually the first chapter where you can buy killer weapons. In this game, and I'll talk a little bit about weapons at this time, killer weapons are like the king. Steel weapons are absolutely terrible. They weigh a ton and they have terrible hit. Even silver weapons their hit isn't particularly good, so they're not great. Killer weapons are awesome. Their hit is like way better than all the other weapons. They always have crit. They have really good damage. I will say, I mentioned this a couple times, but money in this game is really valuable, and we don't have the silver card yet, so I wouldn't recommend potentially splurging too much, but it can be nice to buy some stuff here. But the reason that I brought Merlinus as opposed to just anything else is because both the Secret Book and Goddess Icon I don't think are very useful. You can Goddess Icon Rucker, but I usually don't because I just like having access to the money. You can basically replace this with a Seraphrobe later, which is really nice. But the biggest thing is all these gems. So I would recommend kind of periodically selling gems as you get them. You can't sell from the convoy, but if you need to, you can absolutely bring Merlinus. There's one other chapter that I'm going to be bringing Merlinus on. It's our big buy chapter. It's a little bit later, but so I definitely think you should be considering Merlinus when you want to do shopping and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, for the most part, these units are going to come attack us. So you want to get this house because we're basically going to be coming up this way and we never want to go back. So I'll probably have like Lance and Bertrude go up there and deal with that, and then I'll have Rucker and some of our other units kind of go forward and deal with the ballistas. But yeah, we're going to be skipping around from here on out for the most part. Just go do combat like normal Realm 6 stuff. Okay, and I do just want to show this off as well. Obviously, if you play the chapter, you'll see this, but it's actually a pretty funny, or depressing moment where Sephiel absolutely slaughters Cecilia. So Cecilia is a character that we're going to be getting, I believe actually next chapter. This next chapter is Arcadia, but she does not look very good here. She's absolutely massacred. Yeah, this is going to change the boss. I believe actually Narshid becomes the boss. Oh, actually Zephyr is the boss. But this will keep changing around. Okay, so we just recruited the one character that we're going to be recruiting on this chapter. One other thing that I just want to mention, I know I mentioned this before, but one of the guys in this party and in future reinforcement parties will have a killer lance. So just be aware of that. But here's Melody. So, as you can see, Melody is quite strong. If you know anything about Realm 6, you know that Melody is arguably the best character in the entire game. She is absolutely amazing. As you can see, her base stats are already extremely high for a level 10 Wyvern Rider. She's also an amazing class. Once you get the Delphi Shield, she's pretty much immortal, although her resistance isn't the best. But yeah, her growths are amazing. Her bases are absolutely amazing. There's not really much to say about Melody. She is, other than the usefulness of Marcus early on, the best character in the game by probably quite a margin. And once you get that Delphi Shield, which we'll talk about in a couple of chapters, she's insane. So highly, highly recommend training Melody. Okay, so at this point I have skipped quite a bit. I've dealt with the people in the middle and the group up here. As I said before, reinforcements will start spawning. So you have the Silver Lance, Axe Reaver, Kill Lance was all the same stuff. Archer's actually a little bit behind. So if you do this a little bit faster, especially if you disregard the north and the house and stuff, you can be already pretty close to being across this bridge. And honestly, once you get across the bridge, there's not too much to deal with. Blair hasn't taken over quite yet, but he soon will, and then these wyverns will come attack you. There's a couple of units down here and stuff. Percival is left with his men, so you have to worry about this ballista. These units won't move. I believe these are actually the same. Yeah, Axe Reaver. Oh, Killing Edge. Well, different. I think when you get around here, they'll start moving. But yeah, my recommendation, as I said, is just to kind of deal with the reinforcements from behind. It does make this chapter kind of long and tedious, but I do think that it's the safest way to do it. The other thing I want to mention is that I did finally promote Deke. It took forever, but I did finally do it. I think, as I said, but when I was talking about him when we first recruited him, he's a fine unit. He's a little frail. His defense definitely leaves something to be desired. But again, he's a decent tempo unit, and there's not a lot of good Heroes Crest users in this game, so I think it's totally fine to promote him, but certainly not necessary. So yeah, I'm probably just going to end up dealing with the reinforcements from behind, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the end of the chapter. Okay, so as for dealing with the reinforcements, my recommendation would be to go onto the bridge like this, because you can basically funnel them into 2 units. Lance can, of course, do this amazingly, especially with the support from Alan that we've built. Unfortunately, our Alan is capped. I have mentioned this before, that it's a little annoying that we don't get a nice crest for a little bit. Milady can also do this pretty well, because she can take hits. You know, she does have 15 defense. Pretty well. The biggest thing, and this is why this can be a bit challenging, where is he, is this kill Lance guy. Because you really never know when a crit is just going to completely destroy whatever unit. So the biggest thing I would say is just be careful of him, and be careful of the Paladin. Try to snipe the kill Lance guys as you can. If you're doing an Iron Man, just try to be as careful as you can. You can absolutely lose a character on this bridge to a crit, but that's just kind of a lottery you have to take. Because again, I think it's really difficult to actually get to the boss. What you can do potentially is use some units to hold off these units and then go to the boss. But the problem with that is, like, these wyverns are going to aggro, these units are going to aggro. When you get to around here, these units are going to aggro. So there's a lot of units that you have to kill. So I don't know, as I said, I think this is the safest way to handle the chapter, but just be aware the kill Lance guys are pretty annoying and can ruin runs. Okay, so just really quick, I wanted to highlight just how tedious this map can actually be. As you can see, there's just a crap load of units. Units are really bulky in this game. Not as bulky as, like, Path of Radiance, but still pretty annoyingly bulky. There's also a lot of Javelin units, which makes this take forever. I believe this is the last batch of reinforcements that just showed up. Well, there may be one more. I think that's it, though. But yeah, just be aware, if you want to handle this chapter differently, you absolutely can. But yeah, I think this is the safest way to do it. It's just really tedious. So yeah, I will say these Axe River guys also have some crit. Just be careful. If a crit happens, a crit happens. There's one more thing that I want to mention, which is Milady. As you can see, ours is just turning level 12. She got a great level up. You can absolutely early promote Milady. I mentioned in this game that I don't think early promotion is very good, and I stand by that. Milady is maybe the one exception. The thing is, I don't think it's an exception because I don't think it's necessary. You could spend this chapter, Arcadia, which is the next chapter, and then that Gaiden chapter, easily get her promoted at level 20 by that chapter. And I don't think that she's, like, necessary to have promoted for those couple of chapters. But if you want some tempo, the next chapter, Arcadia, is a Fog of War Desert chapter. So you may want that, but yeah, just be aware. I'd highly recommend getting her as much experience as possible, but I really don't think you need to early promote her, even though you can. Okay, so I've finally dealt with the reinforcements that came. Once you get to this point, I believe there's probably a line here, or maybe it's back. It might just be at the end of this bridge, actually. That's when it'll trigger the new boss, which is Flare. I already mentioned him. I believe it also triggers these guys to come at you, and these 2 Cavaliers down here. So just be aware if you do want to take this strategy of holding this bridge for, how many turns did it take me? Yeah, 30 turns. It takes quite a bit. That you probably don't want to go beyond this because you don't want to have to deal with these reinforcements. These, as I said, will trigger when you get to about here. And these guys, I think you have to be in their range, so just be aware of that. But yeah, we're going to basically work through the rest of the chapter. I probably won't come back again until we're ready to kill the boss here. Okay, wow. So I've never actually done this before. I think I've created a new strat here for myself. My Milady is actually level 20. I almost never promote Milady on this chapter because I usually like to wait until she's level 20, as I said. Usually it's either Arcadia, and usually it's not until, so Arcadia's the next chapter, and there's a Gaiden chapter from Arcadia, and that's usually when I promote her. But yeah, I had her fight basically all the Cavs and Paladins along with Lance over here, and then I basically just had her kill everything, and that's level 20. So you can see, you get a really good idea of just how powerful she is. And this is actually, I would say, a little bit of a weak Milady, at least in the terms of, like, speed. Usually she caps. But yeah, wow, like I said, I don't think I've ever gotten her to level 20 on this chapter, so kind of cool. I don't know if this is, like, this is certainly not necessary, but yeah, it might be kind of an interesting thing to go for. We'll show her promotion here as well. But you can see, you can get a really good idea of why Milady is just as powerful as she is. Her stats are just ridiculous. And once we get that Deathlight Shield, she's going to be basically unstoppable. Yeah, super, super strong. So yeah, I'll kill the last couple of these Cavs, and then I'll probably come back for shopping and the boss. Okay, so I just wanted to show off the boss and just how good Lou can be with Caliver. As you can see, he absolutely destroys the boss. Our Lou is, I've said this a couple of times, really frail, which is a little awkward, but he can take a hit. and there's no crit or anything, so we're gonna go ahead and do that. I will say you can absolutely do this with like Rucker, with like the Worm Slayer. He can still be really good at this stage, but yeah, Air Caliber really clean. Also, if you've promoted any like Archer or Nomad, they can look really amazing too. But yeah, as I said, just really clean to do with the Air Caliber. I wouldn't worry too much about this boss in particular. Our Lou is actually really bad, but that's okay. He's still really good. He's still Lou. So as I said, we'll do some shopping. I'll come back to that, and then we'll end the chapter. Okay, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. What do I like to sell? What do I like not to sell? Basically, obviously, gems can only be sold. As I said before, the Secret Book and the Goddess Icon are two of the stat boosters that I don't like very much, so I tend to sell. The Body Ring is another interesting one. It increases Constitution. I think Constitution is actually really useful. Now, number one, if you're training any Pegasus Knight, highly recommend keeping this. Or if you're training like Sophia, Wendy can also be good. Especially like female units that are going to be using like axes or lances or something. Body Ring can be amazing because the Body Ring on like a Pegasus Knight, for example, is essentially just 2 more speed because they're going to get weighed down by everything. So it sort of depends on what your team looks like, but I would recommend keeping the Body Ring unless you're training like no units like that. And then for other stuff you should be selling, just try to like get a decent gauge of what you're going to be using. Like, for example, light magic. There's really no, because there's no monk in this game. Light magic is pretty redundant. Like, if you promote Saul, he can use light magic, which is kind of nice, but you really just need to buy like 1 lightning for him. Dark magic, there's a couple of shamans in Ray and Sophia. But yeah, just be aware of like what you're using. You might not use archers. Having a little bit of everything is kind of nice, just in case you get like a pre-promote that uses that particular item. But yeah, I'm going to stock up a little bit because we are a little bit short, and then we'll end the chapter. Okay, so I've just bought a bunch of stuff. I think I did overbuy a little bit because, as I said, if you're, we do want to wait for the silver card. But yeah, I like to just have a ton of iron items, especially if I'm using those units. Lances are also really good. Javelins are not as good in this game as they are in like from 7, from 8, from 9 even. But they're still really good. Actually, I think you might not be able to buy axes, which is a little bit unfortunate. Also some bows, just have access to. I think heals is also important to have. I will say that this game isn't quite as important to stock up at every opportunity as in like from 7, for example, where I think it's really important because you tend to run out of stuff. But yeah, stocking up is really useful. And as I said, you can buy killer weapons here. So, yep, that is the end of Chapter 12. Next time we're going to be looking at Arcadia, which is one of the more annoying, or sorry, Chapter 13. I might have said 12 at the start of this too. One of the more annoying missions, but we'll deal with that as we get there. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed.